Hey everybody, it's Lori Lowe and welcome to this episode of My Sacred Binge. So it's November 1st and in many traditions around the world, this is Day of the Dead or Dias de los Muertos. And so it got me thinking about my family. Obviously, Day of the Dead is where we honor those people who have transitioned out of our lives, the people we loved, and honor who they are and how the effect they have on our lives and how their spirit guides us, even though while they're gone, even though they're gone. And so as I said, I got to thinking about my family and heritage generally, and that led to this idea of heritage of binge eating disorder or body shame, or the dieting, gaining weight, dieting, binging, restricting cycle, yo-yo dieting, which I kind of call serial dieting. It's this idea that you just keep dieting again and again and again, even though it never works. So it made me think of my family, and so I realized I wanted to share some of that with you. So first of all, this is my mom. She's been gone for quite a while now, but I, kind of learned to diet from her. And this is the two of us when I was in my early 30s. That was one of those times in my life where I'd lost like 50, 60 pounds and I was quite thin. But that's where I learned it from, is from my mom. And ironically, of course, none of this happens in a vacuum. And my mom learned how to diet from my grandmother, her mom. And I love this picture of my grandma. She was a perfect grandma. I would go over and spend the night with her, and I would get Pop-Tarts and hot cocoa for breakfast. So typical grandma, where all great things came from. I really miss her too. And when I think about this kind of history of dieting and history of always being, wanting to be on a diet, I can't do that in my family without thinking about my brother, Mike. This is my oldest brother. He was 10 years older than me. Unfortunately, Mike died in his 40s, way too young. And Mike struggled with being morbidly obese his whole life. But when I think about it, I'm not sure if he struggled with being morbidly obese as much as he struggled with knowing that he had to be ashamed of who he was. Kind of like me, my mother put Mike on diets the whole time that I can ever remember. I remember him constantly struggling to lose weight and always being ashamed of that. And that went on throughout his whole adult life. And, I think about what really is the legacy that we've passed down, and then there's me. This is obviously me at another time in my life where I was very, almost at my top weight, I would say. And so you see this through line of thinness, large, small, whatever. And the thing that really brings us in common is the fact that we were serial dieters, and that we were ashamed of who we were. We were at war with our bodies, and we were just always on a diet. I remember my grandmother having all these little diet wafers, and that was, the 70s and 80s, and that's where you could get all these diet foods, the Slim Fast and the Nutra bars. Those names I'm totally butchering, I know, but she always had them around, and they were sort of like sweet little sugary snacks on their own. So I would end up binging on those because, hey, why not? It's diet food. And I remember the commercial diets that my mom was on and off. I remember the ones that she put me on and off. But it all came down to being ashamed of who we were and feeling at war with ourselves, like we were not good enough, and we postponed living. I remember times where I didn't go to events or didn't do things because I was ashamed of how I looked. I know my mom did, and I know she told me about that she had was going to be in a friend's wedding, and she was so embarrassed about how she looked in her the bridesmaid's gown, that she said she was sick and couldn't go. And in terms of my brother Mike and my grandmother, I'm only imagining that some other part of, some version of that happened for them as well. And there's even some scientists that feel that not only do we pass along behavioral trauma, as in, I'm afraid of being fat, so I'm going to teach you to be afraid of being fat. Some scientists believe that this neural pathways that we build around dieting and scarcity and being shamed and feeling bad about ourselves literally can change our DNA. So we're not only passing along behavioral heritage to each other, but we may in some cases be passing along a physical heritage of dieting. I'm not sure how to say that any more scientifically, but that we would pass along trauma and predispositions and belief, kind of neural net wired to be a serial dieter. And there's a whole lot more about that to study. So please don't think I'm being terribly scientific right now or using any of the right language, but I think you get my point, that heritage comes in all kinds of shapes. It's not just the genes that are passed down to us. It's not just the environment we grew up in and the behaviors we were taught, but it was also just the way we lived. It was just the culture of living was that you should be ashamed if you were overweight and if you were fat and if you weren't thin. That's actually the right way to say it. If you weren't thin, you just were second-class citizens. I know that to be not true, and I want you to know that that is not true. I got a really good book I want to share with you, another one. And once again, I'm going to put a link to this book down in my post here. That's a paid link if you want to click on it and buy that book. It's terrific. It's called The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. And I've just started reading this, and I have to tell you, this has already started to make me feel, wow, like there's something really going on here in terms of sort of the pervasive nature of our culture and our heritage, in terms of deciding that if you're overweight, you somehow don't get as much space as everyone else. You're too much, too big, too loud, and you shouldn't be taking up that space anyway. So I want to read a quote from Sonia's book here. Again, that's The Body Is Not an Apology. Those of us who believe we do not have the right body spend decades of our life and dollars trying to shrink, tuck, and tame ourselves into the right body, all the while forfeiting precious space on the planet because we don't feel we're entitled to it. Wow, I just think that's so powerful and moving, and God darn it, we are going to turn that on its ear. We are entitled to all the space that we need to be who we are, regardless of what our body looks like. When I heard this, it was read to me actually, but when I heard this, I quickly got a marker and I wrote inside this page here, not only am I entitled to all the space I need, but I'm entitled to my hunger. We get our hunger shamed out of us through our heritage and through what we've learned in terms of our society and culture. If we're too hungry, we need too much, we want too much, we need more than we're getting, we need something different than we're getting. We feel like that's not right. We need to tame ourselves into want something that everybody else feels like we should want. But I have learned that I'm entitled to my hunger. I'm entitled to the binges that I have. I'm entitled to not be ashamed of them. I'm entitled to sit down and think about what's going on with me while they're happening. I'm entitled to, get whatever size is required off the rack or made for me in terms of clothing that makes me feel good. And frankly, fuck the number fuck the size on that. So I'm entitled to my hunger, and you are too. So once again, fantastic book. I'm just getting into it, but it's already just blowing my mind. Everything blows my mind. The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. Again, there's a link in this post if you want to click through on that. It's a paid link. Again, I'm really excited about where this program is going and the feedback I've been getting and what we're learning to do together around bringing, making binge eating not a shameful, hidden, torturous experience, but one in which we become closer to who we really are, what we're really hungry for, and closer to discovering our most authentic selves. So until then, namaste, blessings, well-being upon you. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.